In Unit 12 and 13, we're going to be looking at Firebase. Firebase is a non-SQL database created by Google. There's a number of other similar non-SQL databases available from other companies. Amazon's, I think, is called MongoDB. But we're going to focus on Firebase. The functionality is not that different with this, but Firebase has some better interfaces to Android Studio for development. It's a non-SQL database, and there's some links here to get you started with an introduction to Firebase. So it generally stores information in like JSON or XML data. These non-SQL databases, they're really good. They have lower overhead than SQL databases, but again, they're not good at doing complex queries involving foreign keys and joins and that sort of complex SQL-like stuff. But if you're just storing information like a bunch of postings from your app, you can use this as a web-based database. It's quite fast. It's free to use for most apps and set up. It's part of a bunch of tools that Google has set up for managing apps and interfaces. Firebase can be used from Android apps, websites, iOS apps, and so the idea is that you could have a single database and then could store user information on it, and then whatever app on whatever platform the user is using, they could it's all shared together on the web live. And a lot of apps use this sort of feature. There's a Firebase console here which you can run. You should log in. You may have to sign up for free or sign up for it or something like that, but you should do it. You set up different projects for different things. So we're going to look at this Everyone Votes projects. You can actually set up multiple apps in a project. So here's projects from 2017. We have a number of apps that are using this and posting information. And this is our Everyone Votes app. In here under develop, we will look at authentication and database information and what's stored in the database. We can actually see the app here, Everyone Votes, and we've got some different votes here, and then we have different keys where people post information. We can see what they voted for, dog or snake or whatever. So we're just collecting votes in this database. So let's go look at how we set this up in Android Studio. I'm going to walk you through just the basics with this project on GitHub here. So I'm going to open that up in Android Studio. So I've got some code in here for Firebase, but it's giving me an error. So let's go through the setup. We set up for Firebase. First, we go into Tools and go to Firebase and create the Firebase link. So this pops up our assistant window on the right here. There's authentication, where we can have users sign in with Google accounts or similar things, and real-time databases. There's other options here. For example, storage is used often if you want to store like images on the cloud. You'd use that. But we're just going to do this real-time database. So I'm going to enable that, connect to Firebase here. Sign in with my account, allow that. Okay, so we've got that set up. So that should set up a Firebase file here for us to use. That's giving me an error here that all the Google setup stuff is stored into a JSON file called Google Services in your app folder, and it can't overwrite it because I have an older version of this, so I'm just going to clear that up. So again, sometimes you'll see this if you want to reset things, especially with a project that's configured with my Firebase and you want to get it set up. In your app folder, there will be a Google Services.json file. I'm just going to delete that. And then we're going to connect to Firebase again. And again, it wants to know what Firebase project to create. And so I'm going to use an existing project that I already have because I've already set this up and connect to that. So after a second, it shows that it's connected. That's good. Now I'm going to add the real-time database to your app. It's going to change my Gradle files to include this support. I'm going to accept those changes, and it should resync this information. So dependencies are set up correctly. Again, it should be modifying the build .app file. I mean the Gradle build.gradle file in the app folder and somewhere else. And so now it's got the dependencies all set up, and so my references to my database information has gone away here and is all working. Okay, let's talk a little bit about authentication. In layer apps, what we'll do is we'll have authentication, so a user who's using the app will have to log into like their Google account or something like that, and store information. Only authenticated users will be using your app. You see this commonly with apps. But to start with, we're going to let any user do this. So we're going to kind of clear up, set general rules for authentication. So we've connected to Firebase, we've connected to the real-time database, the second button here. Now we're going to go and set up the login. So we're going to go to the Firebase console here that we have. We're going to go down to our project, the in-class everyone votes project, and we're going to go to authentication. I'm sorry, I didn't even read my instructions. We don't want to go to authentication, we want to go to databases and then rules. So we're going to go to database, select our database here, go to rules, and then check these rules out. So we're going to set up these rules so that everyone can have access. So this is what the rule should say. We should just have read true and write true. That means that whatever everyone has read and write access to these things. So you should take the text, whatever's in here. By default, I forget what that is, but you should change it to, so read should say true and write should be true. So everyone has read and write access to this without logging in. And then that's set up. So that's kind of sets up our Firebase now. So let's go look at how the data is actually set up and used. So again, we're going to create a class to hold our database. We're going to have a voting class. This is a simple Nintendo system where they ask you a simple question like, what's your favorite pet? And they give you a couple answers, snake, dog, cat, or whatever, and you can just vote on one of those. So we're going to do something similar to that. So we're going to generate our class called vote.java, create the fields. We're going to create some constructors. We need an empty constructor and a constructor with parameters. We need some getters and setters, and then we need a toString field. We need all those set up. So let's go to our class. So we have this vote.java file, it's public class vote. We have a string called answer text, and just for demonstration, we have an integer called selection. And then we've generate these other things. Now, in earlier classes, you may have written these all out. Often we don't have to do that here. Let me just delete those and show you how this is done. So I put in my initial text here, and then I'm going to generate some stuff. So your API should be able to do that. I should be able to go down here and choose generate, and then constructors. I want a constructor with no parameters here. Is a basic constructor, and then I want to put in a constructor with both of these parameters, and so it'll set those up for you. I'm going to move this. I should have put my cursor down at the bottom after this. Okay. Similarly, I'm going to insert, I need getters and setters, so I'm going to right click and generate getters and setters. I'm going to do both of those text fields and generate. So it'll do a get answer text, set answer get selection, set selection. That's all done. And then I need a toString method. So I can just go down here and do generate. Sorry if you can't see that. and there's a toString option. I'm going to print those both out, and it has this out. And then I can modify this as needed, but I'm just going to leave it be for now. Okay, so really quickly to set up our class, we just define the attributes we want and then use the generate function to generate all those values with the API. Okay, so we've got that data structure set up, and now we're going to add some code to interface with the database. First, let's look at adding a new record to the database. We need to create a database reference and set that up. Let's look at how the database reference is set up. So I'm going back to main.java. So you need to define a database reference object, and I'm just calling mine dbref. And then you need to get that reference here. So we define our database reference, and then just like how we have to set up our text to tie them to our edit text and things to tie them out to the layout field, here we have to tie our database reference to the reference. So first we define a Firebase database object. So Firebase database, we call it database, and we use this factory. We say get instance, and that'll get a database for us. And once we have that database, we can use get reference to get a reference to that database. And then you just have to give it some name for that database, and here are some string for a key. We're saying this everyone votes. What that's doing is creating, if we go back to our database, here's our app, and here it's creating, it's kind of like a table name, maybe you could think of it. So it's just creating a tag here in JSON called everyone votes, and all your data will be put under that. You can have different databases, different tables, you might think of it. Again, tables were not really the analogy we're working with, but different tags that you're going to store data under, and this is the tag that we're using, everyone votes. So that's set up here with our database reference. So whatever strings here is going to show up here. And so everywhere we want to use and access this database, we use this tag to do that. Okay, now once we have that database reference set up, we can create a new database object here. And you can kind of create your own set of JSON files or strings here. So we're going to start with our database reference we're going to create a child called favorite pet votes here. And then under that, we're going to push, and then we're going to get our key. So we have to get a key, and then we have to push our child up there, or our data up there for this. Let's look at how this is set up again. So we created this tag when we created a database reference, and now we're going to create another tag underneath that, favorite pet votes. And underneath that, there's going to be these keys. Every time a user creates an entry, they'll be given a key, and then under that key will be the information, the answer text, and the selection. So again, from our thing, we have answer text and our selection. Those will be stored under each key, and each person will have a different answer text, different selection that they'll store in here. So let's look at how we do that in the code. So our interface is relatively simple. I probably should, we just have some text up here, and then edit text where they can enter a type of pet and save the vote. You should probably have this as a spinner or some multiple choice things, but I don't have that set up that way in this. But we have this button that you save your vote online. So in our button click event, so here's our on click listener for our button click. We are going to set up our database, and so again, it's a two-step process. First, we're going to have to get a key. This will create a new key in our database for this. So we use our database reference we defined above, and we say .child, and we give it some tag here. Now you don't have to always set up a tag. But again, we're thinking in this database we might have different surveys, so we're going to have a tag for each survey. So our favorite pet vote will be a child tag here, and then we're always going to do a push and then get key here to get our next value. Then we're going to actually store our values out there. but we're going to have to get a vote. So we're going to get our edit text string from the users from this layout, whatever they entered here, and we're going to create a vote for this. We've got a new vote here, and we're going to call our constructor. We're going to pass it some vote text and a vote number. So we're just going to grab the vote text from the get string of the edit text, and then depending on what they selected, we're going to give it a vote number here. Again, this stuff will change a lot from place to place, but basically your goal is to create one of these vote objects that you have and fill it up. So this is our constructor. This is the important thing. We're creating a vote object, and then we're going to store that. So here's how we store that vote in the database. We've gotten our key up above here, remember, and so we're going to do my database reference child favorite pet votes. We're going to use, if we use the tag here, we're going to use the same tag here. And then the child is going to be the key, with the key that we have up here, and then the set value is, and we're going to pass in the vote. It will grab this object and serialize it and put it out in a JSON file that it stores, or in JSON format that it stores out in the database for it. So basically it's these two. We grab a key, we have it create a key for us, and then we do this database votes. So I'm running this on my tablet now, and let's say I want to put in rabbit and save that vote. Save that vote out there, and I should be able to go out to the internet and see that that vote's been saved. Sorry, my screen sharing thing has commercials. That's what popped up there. Okay, so going over here to our vote, we should see a new value here. So when we hit save, it should show it here, and it'll also show it up here in my database. Let me show that. So here's my new entry for rabbit here. So let's do one more. So again, if I enter an entry here and hit save, it sends it out to the database, and my app, we'll see in a sec, is also loading changes from the database here. So it'll go out to Google servers and save there, and also come back here. So let's do one more. Let's say I have a dog. And hit save. We'll see it appear out here, and we'll see it appear here. And again, it's relatively quick. If I vote again for a cat, you'll see it pop up here and here very quickly on both. So here's the cat I just saved. So that's saying it. So again, it's saving it under the everyone votes tag and favorite pet votes tag, and then a key underneath that for it. So let's go look at the next thing where we're actually listing out the information of this information. So I'm going to go, okay, so we've talked about saving a new record to the database. We also get told whenever the database changes. So if you're doing this, working with Firebase, you need to have an on data change and on canceled event. We're not doing anything for the on cancel event, but on data change, we're going to anytime the data in the database changes, we'll be given that information here. Now we can also query the database, but for now I'm just grabbing anytime the data changes, and we're doing an update for that. So let's look at that in our code. So again, this is in our main on-click listener. And so here's on data change. It's in a class for, it has to be in there. We have our database reference. We need to have a child for that, and then we need to have the tag that we want for that, and then we have to add the listener for this. So we've set up a listener for this, and again, we're using the same tag here, favorite pet votes, that we used up here. Now as soon as I see this string tag in more than one places, I'm thinking that really should be a constant, and you're right, you should have that for the constants. Right now I'm leaving it as a string at first so you can see it. So but we're seeing that string here, here, and here. that's the tag we set up that we're saving all this data under. Okay, so then we have an on cancel event, which we're just ignoring, and we have an on data change event here. Now this log, we're just logging some stuff as things happen. Those aren't that important. Same with the edit text. We're setting the text. Once we get that update, we set this text up here to blank, that edit text field. But this is our important stuff where we're getting the text in the database. We're given a database snapshot up here. This is our database snapshot, and we're going to go through the database snapshot and look at each item in that. So we're going to call database snapshot.getChildren, and it'll get all the children of that data we have. And so we're calling this the vote database snapshot. And so this will loop through, and so vote database will be set to each child object. So from this we can get a value, and we can get the vote class here. So let me try to walk you through this in our database. Okay, this everyone votes is the tag we created for the whole database itself when we create the database reference. And then whenever we're saving or reading information from the database, we're using this tag here, the favorite pet votes. Within that, we've got, so we're getting a list of all these values, a key, and then underneath that key is we're storing the vote.java object here, because we wrote that out there. We wrote the vote.java out there. So again, we're going to go have a vote object, and we're going to use our snapshot. Each element, each record, we're going to get one record from our I don't know if record's the right word, one section of JSON file for this with this tag, and we're going to say get value, and we're going to get the vote class. So this is our vote.class object, and I'll read the entire object from it and give it to us, because again we wrote that entire object out to this. And then once we have that, we're going to do vote.toString. We're going to use the toString method here and save the information out. So that's why we see this information here. And again, if we wanted to change this, we would change the toString operation. And again, we can do different things with it, but right now it's just to make things simple. We're just calling the toString operation for that. So again, this is anytime data elements change, we're getting this update, and we're updating our list or something like that with it. So you can see like any sort of chat object or something like that, anything Facebook, you might be getting data changes. You might be then selecting or going through the change, all the data, and deciding what we have. Some of this stuff gets a little more complicated, and so next week we'll be getting into this a little bit more. But this just gets you started on the basics. So the next thing we're going to do in the assignments is work on setting up authentication and setting up a project that's working for you on this. So good luck with it. I hope you enjoy. I really like Firebase. I think it's a really cool way to set up apps.